Carter, a guilty finding having entered on the indictment charging you with the involuntary manslaughter of Conrad Roy III, now sentences you to 2.5 years in the Bristol County House of Correction. 15 months of said sentence shall be deemed a committed sentence, and the balance thereof shall be suspended until August 1st of 2022.
Now, what Michelle Carter did was clearly evil. No one disagrees with that. But should her actions, however immoral and abhorrent, should they be protected by the First Amendment? With me now, attorney and adjunct professor at Drexel University, Lisa Garber. Lisa, thanks for joining us today.
Great to see you again.
All right, Lisa, answer me this. So this has been a fiery debate since this sentence was handed down to Michelle Carter yesterday. No one disagrees that her actions were horrible. Reading those text messages, it's like they came from the devil himself. But however immoral and abhorrent these text messages were, or her intention, is her right to free speech, should that be protected under the First Amendment, or was she rightfully convicted?
I agree with you. It was vile. Her behavior is ridiculous and insane. It's really, really evil. But the First Amendment is extremely broad, and that's why the ACLU just wrote, actually tweeted, and they've been writing articles against this decision. And it's understandable because the protections of the First Amendment are extremely broad. Most legal experts are arguing that this should have been protected under the First Amendment, even though it was evil.
Right, and I guess that's my question. So she was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, and I guess from a legal standpoint, what's the precedent here when it comes to using your words? Can words kill?
This is unprecedented. This is setting precedent, which is also why attorneys, judges, the ACLU are up in arms, because this is extremely meaningful moving forward. We're talking about social media, texting, this digital age. And now this woman getting this pretty lengthy sentence for this involuntary manslaughter charge, she actually is getting convicted of using her words to kill. And you look at what the First Amendment protects, it's very broad. It really has limited carve-outs. And what they're trying to carve out is actual imminent specific threats. Did she specifically threaten him? No. And it also protects, it carves out an exception for trying to incite violence. And it's important to note that under Massachusetts law, there are various states, I believe there's 30 plus states, that actually have a criminal statute saying you can't assist someone in committing suicide. Massachusetts doesn't have that. So she didn't incite someone to commit a crime in Massachusetts.
Right. It's very interesting here. And I guess I would ask you about that. I think it's called the capacity to reject here. He wasn't, to my knowledge, and I don't know all the details to the case. You probably know more of the legalistic stuff than I do. But he had the capacity to reject this. She wasn't, to my knowledge, physically coercing him in any way. She was merely, not to say merely, I don't want to downplay like you said, how vile her behavior was, but she wasn't physically coercing him or forcing him to do this, was she?
No, she wasn't. She was texting him, and of course, there are hundreds of messages, and they also were on the phone speaking when he was in the dying. But here, not protected by to be an appeal, of course, and we understand that her behavior was vile and reprehensible, but this kind of punishment doesn't match what the First Amendment protects.
Right, and we lost you for just a second there, but talk to me about the implications that this could have on other speech, because there are a lot of kids, a lot of teenagers that are bullied and that participate in bullying online. If someone's harsh words can be convicted, can be thought of to be a driving force or a motivator for, self-harm. I mean, we see that situation a lot of times. What are the actual elements then? What kind of precedent is this setting for the elements of what constitutes taking part in someone's own self-violence?
There are experts that argue, well, it's a digital age, but it's the same kind of communication. Whether you're standing next to the person or you're sending them a letter, it's the same. But about almost 10 years ago now, there was a case on MySpace where a 13-year-old committed suicide, and she was cyberbullied by someone who was representing themselves anonymously. They were hiding under someone else's identity. Actually, the case didn't come to fruition. Nothing happened. Nobody was sent to jail. So here, this is really taking a different look at how these communications could alter someone's perception. And you also talked about this poor child that committed suicide, this teenager. He was very mentally, he was depressed. He had a history of depression. But what does that bring to bear on this woman's First Amendment rights?
Right.
Should have been protected.
Right, and I guess, and that brings two questions. First is the perception. Does it have to be a direct threat? Is this precedent setting a direct threat? Or if you do not stop, if you neglect to call for help? Because that was one of the things the judge said about Michelle Carter. You know, you didn't even stop. You didn't call someone. You didn't notify anyone. Is neglect actually now, you know, going to cause a conviction of involuntary manslaughter? Because the slippery slope there is tremendous.
Oh, it's huge. And then you also think about not just cyberbullying online. Now there are a slew of anonymous apps where teenagers are communicating with each other. Saraha just came out. It's at the top of the charts. There are people bullying. There are people sending out threats. You have college campuses evacuated all of the time because of this. This could change the standard for how speech is protected. Not only kids on college campuses, but then you also look at terrorist speech on Twitter, and there are dozens of lawsuits right now on that.
Right. I don't fully understand the legalistic background of how this could be different than hate speech, because there's a lot of hate speech that's protected under our First Amendment. The Supreme Court ruled that there is no hate speech exception within the First Amendment in our Constitution. I don't understand how this is different if she wasn't physically coercing him. I think this might be a mistake, while at the same time praying for the family of Conrad Roy, because it is a sad situation from one side to the other, very heartbreaking.